Abbey condenser. In microscopy, a special two-piece lens which has enhanced light gathering power, similar focusing device in electromagnetic antenna. Abbreviated dialing. In telephone systems, a special circuit requiring fewer than normal dialing operations to connect subscribers. Abnormal dissipation. Power dissipation higher or lower than customary level, usually an overload. Abnormal oscillation. Oscillation where none is desired or expected, such as in an amplifier. Oscillation at two or more frequencies simultaneously when a single frequency is operated is expected. Oscillation at an incorrect frequency. Parasitic oscillation. Abnormal propagation. The chance of shifting the normal path of a radio wave as a displacement in an ionosphere, such as so that the reception is degraded. The unintentional radiation of an energy from some point other than the transmitting antenna. Propagation over the path or in a direction not expected. Abnormal reflections, sharp, intense reflections at frequencies higher than critical frequency of an ionosphere, ionized layer. Abnormal termination, the shutdown of running computer programs or other processes, caused by the detection of an error by the associated hardware that indicates some ongoing series of actions cannot be triggered or executed correctly. Abnormal triggering. False triggering or switching of a circuit or device, such as a flip-flop by undesired source rather than a true trigger signal. Electrical noise pulses are often caused by abnormal triggering. Abrasion machine. Abrasion machine. An instrument for determining the abrasion resistance of a wire or cable. Abrasion resistance. The measure of an ability of a wire or covering to resist mechanical damage. Absolute accuracy. The full-scale accuracy of a measure, the full-scale accuracy of a meter with respect to a primary absolute standard. Absolute address. In a digital computer program, the location of a word in memory as opposed to the location of a word in the program. Absolute code. A computer code in which the exact address is given for storing or locating the preference operand. Absolute coding. In computer practice, the coding that uses absolute addresses. Absolute constant. A mathematical constant where the same value wherever it is used. Absolute digital position. Absolute digital position transducer. Absolute digital position transducer. The physical position transducer whose official signal indicates the absolute position. Absolute efficiency. The ratio x lower s divided by x lower s, where x lower x is the output of a given device and x lower s is the output of the ideal device of the same kind under the same operating conditions. Absolute encoder system. A system which permits the encoding of a function, linear, nonlinear, continuous, step, so on. The supplies of non-ambiguous output. Non-ambiguous output. Absolute error. Absolute error. The difference indicated by the approximate value of a quantity minus the actual value. The difference is positive when approximate value is higher than the exact value, and it is negative when the approximate value is lower than the exact value. Compare relative error. Absolute gain. And absolute gain. Antenna gain for a given orientation when the reference antenna is absolute in space and has no main axis of propagation. Absolute humidity. The mass of water vapor per unit of air quality. Compare relative humidity. Absolute instruction. A computer instruction that instates explicitly and causes execution of specific operation. Absolute magnitude. For complex number of quantity, the vector sum of the real and imaginary components, i.e. the square root of a sum, the squares of those components, see absolute value or absolute impedance. Absolute maximum rating, the highest value quantity that can before malfunction or damage occurs. Absolute maximum power voltage. Absolute maximum supply voltage, the highest supply voltage that can be applied to circuit without permanently altering its characteristics. Absolute measurement of current, the measurement of current directly in terms of defining quantities. A tangent galvanometer method, the current is proportional to the tangent of an angle of deflection of the needle of the instrument. Deflection depends on the torque resulting from the magnetic field produced by the current of the galvanometer coil acting against the horizontal component of the Earth's magnetic field. Electrodynamometer method. With this two-coil instrument, the current is determined by the observed deflection. The torque is the suspension of fiber of the movable coil and the coil's dimensions. Absolute measurement voltage. The measurement of voltage directly in terms of defining quantities. Calorimetric method. The current carrying coil immersed in water raises the temperature of the water. The difference of the potential that forces the current through the coil then is determined by the terms of the equivalent heat energy. Disc electrometer method, in which the setup, a metal disc is attached to one end of the balance beam and is attracted to a stationary disc mounted below it. Using electromagnetism, the voltage can be applied to two discs. The other end of the beam carries a pan in which the direct waves are placed. At the balance, the voltage is determined in terms of the weight required to restore balance, the upper disc area, and the disc separation. Absolute minimum resistance. The resistance between the wiper and the nearest terminal of the potentiometer. When the wiper is close to the terminal as physically possible. All potentiometers have two such specifications, one for each end of the terminal. Absolute measuring voltage. Absolute Peltier coefficient, the product of the absolute Seebeck coefficient, the absolute temperature of the material. Absolute pitch, the tone in the standard scale determined according to the rate of vibration, the independent of other tones in the range of pitch. Absolute pressure, the pressure per force unit area of the gas or liquid determined with respect to that of a vacuum taken as zero. Absolute pressure transducer. Absolute pressure transducer. A transducer actuated by pressure from the outputs of two different pressure sources, whose own output is proportional to the difference between two applied pressures. Absolute scale, a scale in which absolute zero indicates the lowest physical possible value of the parameters can attain. The standard scale for measurement of a quantity, a universally agreed upon scale for determining the variable quantity. The Kelvin temperature scale, the Rankine temperature scale. Absolute Seebeck coefficient, the quotient as an integral from the absolute zero given by a temperature of the Thomson coefficient of the material divided by the absolute temperature. Absolute spectral response, the frequency output or such response of a device in absolute power units such as milliwatts, as opposed to the relative units such as decibels. Absolute system of units, a system of units in which the fundamental absolute unit is expressed in length, mass, charge, and time. Length, mass, charge, and time, and all the physical units, including the practical ones, are then derived from absolute units. Absolute temperature. Temperature is measured on either the Kelvin or Rankine scales, where zero represents the total absence of energy heat. Absolute temperature scale, the Kelvin temperature scale in which divisions are equal in the size of 1 Celsius to the 0 point of absolute zero, the coldest possible temperature, approximately negative 73 Celsius. The Rankine temperature scale in which the divisions are equal to the size of Fahrenheit, in which the 0 point is absolute zero. Approximately 459 Fahrenheit. Absolute tolerance, the value of a component as it deviates from the specified or normal value. It is usually expressed as a percentage of specified value. Absolute units, fundamental physical units such as absolute system of units, which all others are derived. See, for example, ampere, ohm, volt, watt. Absolute value, the magnitude of quantity in which the magnitude of quantity without regard to sign or direction. The absolute value of A written as A, the absolute value of the position of the number itself, thus 10 equals 10, and the absolute value of the negative sum signals as two lines, a negative 10, and is equal to 10. The absolute value circuit, the circuit that produces a unipolar signal in response to the bipolar input, and the proportion of the absolute value of the magnitude of input. Absolute value computer, a computer in which the data is processed in its absolute form. Every variable maintains its full value compared to incremental computer. Absolute value device, a computer practice in which the device delivers a constant polarity without signal equal to the amplitude, so that the input signal, thus the output signal, always has the same sign. Absolute zero, the temperature negative 273 or 459 Fahrenheit and 0 Kelvin, the coldest possible temperature representing the absolute absence of heat. Absorbed wave, a radio wave that dissipates in the ionosphere as a result of molecular agitation. This effect is pronounced in the low and medium frequencies. Absorption band. See absorption spectrum. Absorption circuit, a circuit that absorbs energy from one circuit to another from the signal source, especially in a resonant circuit, such as a wave meter or a wave trap. Absorption current, in a capacitor, the current resulting from the absorption of energy by a dielectric material. Absorption dynamometer, a power pressure instrument in which the brake absorbs energy from the revolving shaft or wheel. Absorption fading, a fading of radio wave. Absorption fading, a fading of a radio wave resulting in or from a slow change from absorption of a wave to the line of propagation. Absorption frequency, see wave meter. Absorption line, see absorption spectrum. Absorption loss, see transmission loss caused by dissipation of electrical energy or conversion of it into heat or other forms of energy. Loss of or all by parts of a skywave because the absorption by the part of the ionosphere, also called ionospheric absorption or atmospheric absorption. Absorption marker, a small blip introduced as an oscilloscope trace to indicate the frequency point. It is so called because it is produced by the action of a frequency calibrated tuned trap, similar to the absorption wave meter. Absorption modulation, an amplitude modulation of a transmitter or an oscillator by means of an audio frequency absorber circuit. In its simplest form, the modulator consists of a few turns of wire coupled with the transmitter tank coil and interconnected carbon microphone. The arrangement absorbs energy from the transmitter by varying the rate of the microphone changes its resistance in accordance to the sound waves it receives. Absorption spectrum. For electromagnetic waves, a plot of absorption coefficient of the medium of propagation versus frequency. Emission spectrum. Also see emission spectrum, absorption spectrum, absorption trap, see wave trap, absorption wave meter. A resonant frequency indicating that it is inductively coupled to a device under test. AC base current. AC base current. Symbol I, the AC component of a base current in which the bipolar transistor. AC base. AC based resistance, symbol R, the dynamic base resistance in which the bipolar transistor. AC based voltage, symbol V, the AC component in which the base voltage in a bipolar transistor. It is an AC input signal. AC input signal voltage. It is a common emitter amplifier or an emitter follower amplifier. AC basis, AC bias. In a tape recorder, if a high frequency current that passes through the recording head to linearize operation. AC cathode. Symbol I, the AC component of a cathode current in an electron tube. AC cathode resistance. Symbol R, the dynamic cathode resistance in an electron tube. AC cathode voltage. The AC component of a cathode voltage in an electron tube. It is the AC output signal voltage in cathode follower and grounded grid amplifiers. Accelerated life test. A life test that simulates the effects of time on devices or apparatus by artificially speeding up the aging process. Accelerated service test. A service in which the bench test in which equipment or circuit is subjected to an extreme condition in an attempt to stimulate the effects of average use for over a long time. Accelerating conductor or relay. A conductor or relay which prompts the operation of a succeeding device in which the starting mode according to established conditions. Accelerating electrode. Accelerating electrode in a ray tube, in a cathode ray tube, or in a klystron, the electrode in which the accelerating voltage is applied. Accelerating time, the time in which the elapsed time in which it starts, the voltage is applied to a motor and ends in which the motor shaft reaches the maximum speed. Accelerating voltage, the positive high voltage applied to accelerating electrode of a cathode ray tube to increase the velocity of electrons in the beam. Acceleration derivative. Acceleration expressed as the second derivative of a distance with respect to time. Acceleration potential. See accelerating voltage. Acceleration switch. A switch that operates automatically when acceleration of a body in which the attracted exceeds the predetermined rate in a given direction. Acceleration time, the time in which it requires the computer to take in or deliver information after interpreting instructions. See access time. Acceleration torque. During the acceleration of a period of a motor, the difference between the torque demanded and the torque actually produced by the motor. Acceleration voltage. The potential between the accelerating elements in a vacuum tube, the value in which it determines the average electron velocity.